phone will be locked up. Therefore, we'll do a periscope. We're doing this periscope. We're going in to watch jury selection in the UN, the first of 2 UN bribery cases. There's a second one involving Ban Ki-moon's brother still on the lam. The UN bribery case about Ng Lap Seng, Macau-based businessman that accused of bribing not only John Ashe, President of the General Assembly, but also Francis Lorenzo, Deputy Ambassador of Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, who was also the head of South News, which was a member of the UN Correspondents Association, accredited by DPI, given a full office, even as inner-city press, which reported on the corruption, was thrown in the street, its laptop smashed on the ground, and remains restricted more than 16 months later. This is the courthouse that we're going into. This is the courthouse where the jury is being selected for the Ng Lap Seng UN bribery case. And as we reported yesterday, filings over the weekend reveal that the UN lied when they said that they cooperated with the government. They didn't. See footnote 1 of the prosecution's June 25th letter, in which it said, it is said that the UN refused to say who they spoke with for the UN task force report, which now the defense is using to say it wasn't a bribery, everyone does it at the UN. Well, the jury selection is on, and Ng Lap Seng is sitting in the front row with at least 4 lawyers, and the room is full of prospective jurors, most trying to get out of jury duty, and the prosecutors are there, and the judge is there. Outside the courtroom, posters of famous corruption cases, Mario Biaggi, abuse cases, Justin Volpe. That was Abner Louima of Haiti, from which Inner City Press has just returned, having witnessed the UN's unbelievable irresponsibility, criminal negligence, killing 10,000 people, paying not a penny. But inside, it's worth seeing. Ng Lap Seng is there. He began the case with at least 5 co-defendants. One died mysteriously with a barbell falling on his trachea. All the others pled guilty, including Francis Lorenzo of South News and the Dominican Republic Mission, including Heidi, a number of them. You can look them up. We've written about all of them. Even his personal assistant pleaded guilty. But there was Ng Lap Seng. Maybe he looked smaller than he used to, a little shorter. Ng Lap Seng. You can see his photograph at the UN Correspondents Association ball at Cipriani's with Ban Ki-moon. As Inner City Press reported, he paid for a photograph with Ban Ki-moon. And the UN's response, as Inner City Press reported, even then, on the massive corruption taking place within the UN, the purchase of access, the UN's response was to throw Inner City Press in the street, strip its accreditation, throw its computer down, and give its office to an Egyptian state media that couldn't even find this courthouse, much less ever come here. Never asked a question. And as this trial goes forward, we hope that a quarter of what took place and is taking place at the UN is exposed. If it is, the UN will either have to be shut down as a corrupt organization or improve itself. The latter would be our hope. This is the courthouse. This is the place where one can only hope, even if the UN is immune and impugn as by law, that it will be revealed. Its full extent of its corruption and censorship will be revealed, and it will be forced to improve or end it or mend it. To be continued. The testimony has been by Francis Lorenzo, the head of South News, an organization that bought its way into the UN, including taking out full-page ads in the ballroom spread of the UN Correspondents Association, and having Ng Lap Seng get photos with Ban Ki-moon. Now, in some reporting on the trial, they've said that it just happened that the GA document that was purchased, the Department of Public Information allowed the Chinese businessman, as part of his scheme, to have fraudulent events inside the UN. The journalist group took the money and arranged, or was the venue, yes, it sounds like it, was the venue for Ban Ki-moon, then Secretary General, to have photos with the Chinese-based businessman, who then claimed that the UN wanted his $3 billion conference center. In any event, as we asked today at the noon briefing, further uptown at the UN, one of the issues has become videos of Francis Lorenzo. South News got its material into UN TV archives under the watch of Stefan Dujarric, the spokesman, who, as Inner City Press pursued the case, threw it in the street. 17 months under restriction. He loves it. But this is UN corruption, and we're going to go in. We're not going to be able to broadcast inside, but we'll be definitely writing a story and hopefully doing a periscope afterwards if the phone can be effectively checked in the locker. To be continued. In fact, no, hang on. A stand-up. We can do it. This is the courthouse where the UN bribery scandal is put on trial. Now, will the full extent of UN corruption be revealed? That's our hope. We're going in. Now, in the courtroom, this is a continuation of the Ng Lap Seng trial that we just covered without the phone, but we're outside. Here's what we can say. In the defense team of Ng Lap Seng, approximately 10 individuals. 10 individuals, some sitting in the front, some sitting in the back, bankers' boxes, exhibits, documents, UN videos, some trade journals. Yes, the legal advisor of the U.S. mission in the House. We recognize him because we always see him in the UN. He usually covers the 6th Committee. But today, he was covering the Ng Lap Seng trial. Yes, he was there. Was there no one from the United Nations to hear their organization exposed as the most corrupt organization, where a DPI is involved with people selling consular generalships for $600,000, and the people say, I can't recall, I don't remember? Where was the UN? The UN is just pretending it doesn't happen. Its press corps, extremely happy, having actually accepted funds from South News. Was there a refund? Was there a refund of the money for the full-page ads of South News of Ng Lap Seng to get photos with Ban Ki-moon? How can Ban Ki-moon, corrupt Secretary General of the United Nations, who took photographs with the defendant to promote his business, how can Ban Ki-moon become an ethics officer of the Olympic Committee? Ask yourself. That's what he's in line for. The further witnesses who will be coming forth in this trial, they involve a UN official named Simon Hannaford. This is an exclusive. This, yes, is an exclusive report. The UN itself, what could their witnesses be offered for? How could the United Nations itself, does it even need to defend itself? Is it so shameless that it can take taxpayer money to be a venue for the sale of citizenship and consular generalships? Intercity Press exclusive from the courthouse. The glowering Ng Lap Seng. Now, we might try to put these on a photograph website, in which case there may be a slight delay, but we'll get them out. This is the report. And sad to say, we have to go uptown because under the UN's, the only UN journalist covering the UN corruption trial is the one that was thrown in the street, its office stolen, its files dumped on the ground, and a no-show Egyptian dictator-sponsored media called Akbar al-Yam, former president of the UN Correspondents Association, put in its office to take up space so that Intercity Press is locked out of the UN and can't cover the corruption scandal. But cover it we will. Okay, here we are. There's the courthouse. We're going for it again after asking at the UN noon briefing whether the UN is even tracking the case in which its full corruption is being exposed. The U.S. mission has had a guy there, the legal advisor. The UN wouldn't even say if it had anyone or if anyone there was receiving reports on it. Wouldn't comment on $600,000 paid for positions. Nothing. We're going in. Today, at 9:30, the new Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, signed in 6 more guys. Everyone was great, hand-slapping. What's been changed? Lack of transparency, unaccountability, censorship continuing. But let's go in. But I digress. Let's go in. It's not like the UN is being unfairly charged with corruption and yet solving problems. Look at Cameroon. Look at the Rif region of Morocco. Look at Yemen discussed today. But this is something that we're covering because the trial is now, and something will happen. Whether or not Ng Lap Seng is convicted, the information that's come out should be acted on. To be continued. Okay, so another day of the Ng Lap Seng trial has gone by. Much of it spent on the cross-examination of Mr. Francis Lorenzo at great detail. The birth of South News. It was said that Mr. Francis Lorenzo is the one who named South News. He named it in the Millennium Hotel bar with Forrest Cow and Betty Cow. This is the car in which Mr. Ng Lap Seng goes back to his 47th Street abode. These are defense lawyers of Ng Lap Seng with their exhibits. The case is going on. Today we asked the UN, and some at great length, if they had any comment on the sale, the absolute sale of positions by the President of the General Assembly, John Ashe, may he rest in peace, for $600,000. They didn't, of course. Is Mr. Lorenzo any better than Ng Lap Seng? Not really. Are some UN officials any better than the two? Not really. Francis Lorenzo repeatedly saying, I don't remember, I don't recall. It might be my email, I don't know. Do you remember the meeting? I don't know. Maybe I'll remember tomorrow. The man has no credibility. If Ng Lap Seng, in fact, is acquitted, it will be because Mr. Francis Lorenzo has no credibility at all. But ask yourself, Francis Lorenzo ruled the UN for some period of time. Francis Lorenzo bought events in the delegates' dining room. Francis Lorenzo presented awards to Ban Ki-moon's chief of staff, Susanna Malcora, to Sigrid Kaag, the head of the UN mission in Lebanon. Ng Lap Seng got photographs with Ban Ki-moon arranged after having taken out full-page ads with the UN Correspondents Association, on whose board are Reuters, now AFP, Gianpaolo Pioli, of Italian journalist landlord renting apartments to war criminal ambassadors. The UN is entirely corrupt, and when you report on it, the inmates are running the asylum. The UN allows corrupt officials and journalists. Well, is Stefan Dujarric a pawn of the corruptos, or part of it, or part of the corruption? Under his watch, South News, you heard about it today. Well, you didn't, because you're not allowed to film in the courtroom. But we're going to write a number of stories, because it's amazing how corrupt the UN is. An organization that was nothing but a plaything funded by a billionaire from Macau to buy documents from the UN was allowed to run award ceremonies that Christina Gayach, the head of DPI, went to. And when Inner City Press asked her why she went, she had Inner City Press thrown out of its office into the street and its computers broken. This is how corrupt the UN is. And the new guy, Mr. Antonio Guterres, hasn't changed a thing. Antonio Guterres has continued the corrupt rule of the Department of Public Information, which throws out investigative journalists, which allows scam events still to this day. There's just a new crop of billionaires, a new crop of scams. Not all NGOs are scams, but South News was a scam, and they were allowed to do events on the 4th floor. They had UN officials sucking up to them in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, and no one has been held accountable. And the censorship regime instituted by Christina Gayach, who allowed this Chinese billionaire on trial here to have scam events in the UN lobby that people still there attended very happily. No accountability. To be continued. Okay, here we are, once again, at the federal courthouse for the corruption trial, the UN bribery trial, to be specific, involving Ng Lap Seng, Macau-based businessman who purchased the United Nations and its Department of Public Information and other parts, including the Office of South-South Cooperation of UNDP. Inside today, and the reason we've come here at the beginning rather than the end of the day, there's supposed to be a UN witness, the witness being Mr. Simon Hannaford, Chief Legal Officer of the UN Development Program, which oversaw the Office of South-South Cooperation, which was not only received a grant from Ng Lap Seng's Sun Kianip group, but beyond that, solicited itself $100,000 contributions to sit next to UN officials. They sold access, and then Ng Lap Seng bought it. How this guy from UNDP is going to testify as to the scruples of the UN is unbelievable. Number two, yesterday, as we've reported, and you'll find it if you go to innercitypress.com, something called the Public-Private Alliance Foundation, founded by Francis Lorenzo, has as one of its collaborators UNDP. So there's a connection. How can the witness purportedly impeach or rebut Francis Lorenzo when he's the head legal officer of an organization that collaborates with Lorenzo's group, the PPAAF? Many questions, and we'll end for now because we're going to get in. This is the courthouse where Ng Lap Seng is on trial. Here we are. It's just down at the U.S. federal courthouse, where it turns out the UN gave a partial waiver for Simon Hannaford, the chief legal officer of UNDP, to testify. stayed as long as we could because now we have to run to the noon briefing. And Ben said, oh, yes, Ng Lap Seng's Sun Tian Ip Foundation had promised a big grant to the Office of South-South Cooperation, and some had been spent on this fraudulent Macau event. Some would be returned. They never held a press conference. They never explained anything. Today, in court, under oath, Mr. Simon Hannaford was walked through a series of UNDP documents which state as an absolute exclusion from private sector engagement, including money-taking, gambling, and other controversial activities. Well, everyone knows that Ng Lap Seng runs casinos. Having come back to the noon briefing from the courthouse in which it was said and further exposed the full extent of the UN's corruption, no answers at all from Mr. Stefan Dujarric. Refused to say if anyone was held accountable. Refused, let's go down the line as we narrate this. Refused to say, claimed that the Office of South-South Cooperation is accessible when they've never held a press conference. Yesterday he said, call the Sudan country team. They never answered. The UN has reached a level of unaccountability and corruption yet not seen. Money taken from a Chinese-based magnet and not one person held accountable. Lawyers given partial waivers to go down and sing the praises of the UN. Question about whether there will be a reform document. Let the member states ask it. This, of course, is the same spokesman who had inner-city press thrown out of the briefing room for covering the Ng Lap Seng connection to the UN Correspondents Association. And now he puts forward another witness. We guess maybe this guy will answer something. It's unacceptable for the UN to answer no questions on its corruption case and to throw the media that asked them out. 0 for 4. Okay, and we're back. The screen froze up. But there's much to be said about this corruption trial. What a piece of work is the United Nations, where positions were sold, $600,000. A scam media partnered with the UN, South-South News, and with the UN Correspondents Association, buying full-page ads, producing a diminutive Chinese billionaire in a tuxedo to take pictures with Ban Ki-moon. Unbelievable. Nothing has been fixed. But we're going to continue to report, even as coming in through like tourists, while no-show Egyptian state media, no-show, no question, no nothing. The UN is corrupt. Yes, corrupt censors. Unable to fix anything. Still blathering. If you care about the Sustainable Development Goals, you have to take a look at what is being revealed in the Ng Lap Seng MDG trial. MDGs, look at the business plan produced by Francis Lorenzo in a trip in December 2012 to China. That's what came up. That's where he said he's partnering with the UN. Ng threatened to cut the money because these guys, Vivian Wang and Lorenzo, according to the testimony, were spending massive amounts of money on casinos in Las Vegas and Atlantic City. SDGs, yes, SDGs. Hotels in Monaco, SDGs. UNDP, SDGs. Office of South-South Cooperation, totally corrupt. Never cleaned up. Never held a press conference. Never. Trying to make an agreement with South-South News. Well, the Macau August 2015 Sleaze Fest, the video is coming in. It's coming in. And who was there? UN journalists, UN ambassadors. Everything was for sale. A small Chinese billionaire leaned back and laughed as he bought documents from the General Assembly. Nobody cares. Nobody fixes anything. We're going in. Okay, here we are at the federal courthouse. Just attended the continuation of the Ng Lap Seng UN bribery case. Pretty shocking. This was the end of the cross-examination and some redirect of Francis Lorenzo, former deputy permanent representative of the Dominican Republic, head of South-South News, and apparently a UN staff member. Yes. But we'll have more on that. Once Lorenzo was done, they brought in the next witness, who is the FBI agent who arrested Ng Lap Seng and Jeffrey Yin. They brought into evidence seized, including a surreal DVD video involving, yes, Ban Ki-moon and Spencer Baldwin of Antigua and Barbuda, and any number of UN personalities, including at the Millennium Hotel straight across the street from the UN, partaking in corrupt activities with the defendant, Mr. Ng Lap Seng. And so, it is shocking that the UN has nobody down at this trial, because Ng Lap Seng, Ban Ki-moon, Francis Lorenzo, an absolute it's incredible that Ban Ki-moon is being considered as an Olympic ethics official. It's incredible. Ban Ki-moon's picture all over the place. The Macau meeting. Ambassador Monim of Bangladesh, who we asked Farhan Haq about. Oh no, in front of Farhan Haq. We asked Bangladesh's current ambassador about today. Ban Ki-moon is corrupt, and the UN is entirely corrupt, and in fact evicted the only press that covered the trial and even asked about it. Shocking. Going to write a story when we get back to the UN. We have to rush back because the UN is having thrown inner city press in the street for covering the trial. These are the defense. This is the defense team, Jensen and Jensen. Let's cross. See, we're not really trying to. We don't really want to be interviewing the counselors on this case. Lorenzo did end. This is New York City. Yes, this is the Federal Courthouse District. This is the Chambers Street Station. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. There goes the defense team, Mr. Park, Mr. Jensen. They're doing a good job. We're in no way against them. But what we can say is that Ban Ki-moon is corrupt. The institution that should be on trial in this courthouse is the United Nations, which provided a GA document which went across the street to hotels. The UN Correspondents Association, which took South News' money for full-page ads and produced Mr. Ban Ki-moon for photo ops in Cipriani. Yes, it's true. Absolutely corrupt. The UN should itself, maybe it really should move to Macau into an enormous conference center, because it's entirely corrupt. And the idea that you can throw the media out that covers the documented corruption and allow in full access to those who took the money from South News and sold the UN down the river is absolutely shocking. Now, what? There's much more to be said about the South News Ng Lap Seng Ban Ki-moon corruption trial, but we have to run back to the UN. Okay, we're starting it up again. This was the day. This was the day where in court, the bookkeeper of South News, bribery vehicle, bribery conduit, as was described in the indictment, testified about the high rents paid in the office building, 1 Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza. There were Excel spreadsheets with very small numbers. There were also payments for not only the $20,000 a month salary, but free apartments for Francis Lorenzo, who's pled guilty, Vivian Wang, who's pled guilty. Also, the purchase of 2 Mercedes. The bookkeeper said, we got a good deal. We got 2 instead of 1. It was a great deal. And the jurors laughed, particularly a juror on the closest side toward the audience. We're out here in front of the court. Sometimes we take a cell phone photo. Maybe they're going to go out another way today. Maybe they don't appreciate that. And in the event, we have to rush back to the UN before 7 o'clock because that's the censorship hour. Just out of the courthouse. Amazing. Inside, the bank records of South News, the bribery conduit used by Ng Lap Seng to purchase the United Nations lock, stock, and barrel, are being displayed in front of the jury. Payments to John Ashe's wife, now widow, Anila Chelian, $6,000 a month. Memo, Antigua, wife. Also, a number of other people paid, still in the UN in various capacities. UN staff. Yes, UN staff. Unbelievable. The UN is corrupt. We're now headed to the UN via the subway. Okay, we're nearing the United Nations, having just covered as much as we could the John Ashe / Ng Lap Seng trial, the UN bribery trial. We can go fast. We can get in behind these people come to genuflect at the sordid trawl. Today, in the Ng Lap Seng case downtown, the bookkeeper of South News presented on the screen a number of Excel spreadsheets of payments. And I want to do this delicately. Would the UN be concerned if the now part of the evidence in the case, payment records of South News, showed current, recent, and in some cases revolving UN staff and consultants on the payroll? Would that be of concern? And if so, who in the UN is actually tracking this case? Because that's not the purpose of the case. The government is not going to make a finding one way or another, but these evidences are going in. And so who is actually tracking the case?
There are UN people on different days who are testifying in the case, and there are others who are monitoring this. I don't have anything further to say about the case at this stage.
There was one guy that testified, and he was there for 2 hours, and he claimed immunity as to himself. I guess I'm asking you, would it be of concern? So just rather than who's monitoring the case, would this be of concern to the UN? The UN, has it closed the books on its own responsibilities and links to the case after those audits, or are they in fact monitoring what's coming out in the case?
We are in fact monitoring what's coming out in the case. Yes.
This is the podium from which no questions are answered. This is the podium. This is the table from which press gets thrown out of the room by the spokespeople. And this is where the cover-up of the extensive purchase of the United Nations has taken place. To be continued. Or actually, hang on. Let's check it out. It was to cover a meeting of a group funded by South News, now shown in the U.S. federal court as absolutely corrupt, that Inner City Press entered, as it said it would, in publicly and in writing, to film the meeting. Filmed it with this phone held high. The individual you just saw and his boss, Mr. Stefan Dujarric, were summoned in by the UN Correspondents Association's leadership and told to evict a journalist seeking to cover a corruption case, in this case, linked to them. And, although leaving the room, the Department of Public Information under Christina Gayach, who went to the South Awards, who allowed Ng Lap Seng to purchase the slavery memorial of the UN, Inner City Press was thrown in the street. Its office, all of its files were evicted onto First Avenue, and the office has been given to an Egyptian state media who is not here today, who is rarely here and has not asked one question. Not even what day it is in a year. The UN is corrupt. Okay, it's coming toward a close. The week has ended in the Ng Lap Seng trial. Yes, it's a show. It's a show where Ng Lap Seng bought the UN. It sounds like fiction, but it's all too true. The evidence is Ng Lap Seng, Francis Lorenzo, and South News conspired together to buy the United Nations. Now, ironically, Mr. Ng Lap Seng just left the courthouse in his black SUV to be taken to his house arrest, going right by the filming of a TV show. Which is stranger, the Chinese billionaire who bought the UN and the UN doing nothing to repair itself, or this TV show, whatever it is? Those gathered on the sidewalk up ahead in suits are not, in fact, lawyers and flunkies and functionaries. They are, in fact, extras who, at the appropriate time, will cross the street as the film is being filmed. Now, we can say this, Periscope exclusive. Things are coming to a close. The government may rest its case Monday or Tuesday. The defense has been charged with preparing a chart. This is also involves documents and deciding whether the defendant, Mr. Ng Lap Seng, will in fact testify. Life imitates art, and art imitates life. It's all a big scam. The UN went through the motions of pretending to care, of how it was exposed as entirely open to corruption. We're covering this trial. There's nobody else covering it, to my knowledge. Certainly not anyone that covers the UN. Let's pull back. Maybe we'll cross. And we have to get back. Wait, I forgot. Life is stranger than art. If we don't get back, we can't get into the UN. They'll steal our computers just as they broke it. UN security. Throw inner city press in the street for asking about the connections of the Department of Public Information and the UN Correspondents Association with South News and Ng Lap Seng, excuse me. Mr. Ng Lap, it is alleged by his defense attorney, Ty Park, might testify. Now, that would be a bombshell. Why is the government not using Vivi Wang? Where are the other defendants? Where's Jeffrey Yin? Mainstream media, nobody's covering it, okay? Nobody, I'm telling you. Every day I go to the UN noon briefing and ask about the trial, and these people, nothing. You know what? They have a conflict of interest. Yes. South News, the mainstay of this case, its budget entirely funded by Ng Lap Seng, its purpose procuring false UN approval for a conference center in Macau, doctoring documents. South News gave money to the UN Correspondents Association, on which Reuters, AFP, they have permanent seats. The reporters come and go, but the organization remains represented. Therefore, there's a conflict of interest. Could that explain the lack of coverage? Could the love of the UN explain the lack of coverage? You can go over it. We've hit Periscope number 25 on this one and article number 61. We'll end it here and now because we have to go back. We are required to go back to the UN before 7 or lose our computer due to UN censorship of coverage of its corruption trial. Today, a UN guy said, you're doing the UN a service by showing the problems. That's what I thought, but that's not why I do it, but that's not how the UN sees it. They evicted inner city press. They've restricted it since the eviction. They broke its computer. They gave its office to an Egyptian state media, dictator media, that never comes in and never asks questions. The UN is as bad as the regimes that it sometimes denounces. The UN is corrupt.